This program is proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.
Every country in the world is affected by one or more forms of malnutrition, with recent statistics from the World Health Organization indicating that in 2024, approximately 733 million people worldwide were affected by undernourishment. This represents an increase of 152 million people experiencing hunger in the last 5 years. The Global Hunger Index 2024 indicates that Somalia, Yemen, and Chad are among the countries most affected by hunger and malnutrition. Additionally, an estimated 18.2 million children were born into hunger in 2024. Combating malnutrition in all its form is one of the greatest global health challenges. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 2 of Zero Hunger aims to end all forms of malnutrition by 2030, including achieving internationally agreed targets on stunting and wasting in children under 5. In Papua New Guinea, although not as obvious as some of the other developing countries, it has experienced the prevalence of malnutrition at a significant scale. This has prompted various support interventions by various development partners in Papua New Guinea. For instance, recently World Vision partnered with the National Child Nutrition Project to combat malnutrition in PNG.
So this project is primarily focused around addressing children's stunting and malnutrition. We do that through a multifaceted approach. So one of the ways we look at doing that is through financial literacy. We have a program around gender inclusive financial training where we can assist families and duty bearers to look at managing finances in a more constructive and helpful way. Then we also look at nutrition sensitive agriculture, where we can look at different ways in which different garden products and different gardening methods are available.
According to the Secretary for Community Development and Religion, he stated that malnutrition should not be a problem in Papua New Guinea, given our abundant food supply. However, education has been a major impediment.
The kind of nutritious food, we have abundance of food in Papua New Guinea. The issue is we don't necessarily know what is the right kind of food to take in order to build our cognitive capability. So with this kind of program, that is now assisting mothers, assisting parents at the community level to know the kind of food that they harvest in the garden, what is best for the nutrition to develop the child cognitive abilities.
Good night, Papua New Guinea. I'm Malcolm Wyra, and welcome to another episode of InFocus. Tonight, we discuss the issue of malnutrition and its prevalence in Papua New Guinea. Joining us for discussions is UNICEF PNG Office Chief of Nutrition, Andrew Musuyuki Semi. Andrew, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. Firstly, Andrew, how much of a problem is malnutrition in Papua New Guinea?
Let's start by understanding the different forms of malnutrition. We do have several forms of malnutrition that includes stunting, includes underweight, it includes as well micronutrient deficiencies, as well as overweight and obesity. In our discussion tonight, we will focus especially on stunting, which is a form of malnutrition whereby a child normally is shorter for their age.
What would you attribute the trend of malnutrition in Papua New Guinea to?
The causes of malnutrition are multifaceted. They are diverse, okay, and they cut across different sectors. But generally, there are two major causes of malnutrition. The first one is inadequate food intake, while the other one is around inadequate access to appropriate social services and childcare practices. Talking about inadequate diets, this starts from pregnancy when the mother is pregnant with the child. If the mother is not receiving adequate nutrition during pregnancy, then this has an impact on the child. And this causes what we call intrauterine growth retardation. hence stunting can start during pregnancy. Beyond pregnancy, when the child is born, if we have poor feeding in the form of lack of breastfeeding or suboptimal breastfeeding, then the child can also go into malnutrition. Beyond the first 6 months, when the child is introduced to complementary food, if the child is not receiving adequate quantities and quality of food, then this can also lead to malnutrition. So overall, inadequate diets can lead to malnutrition. In the second part, whereby we have inadequate access to appropriate diet, appropriate childcare practices, and social services. If we have limited access to the child of nutrition services, inadequate access to health, inadequate access to education, including social protection, then this can lead to malnutrition as well. Okay, the food environments where the children live and school can also exacerbate and increase the chances of children becoming malnourished.
Okay. Back to my earlier question about the prevalence of malnutrition in Papua New Guinea. Could you give us a context of the current rate or trend in Papua New Guinea?
I have to mention that the data that we have is quite old. The last National Nutrition Survey was done in 2010, meaning that it's 14 years ago. This means that the data that I'm going to quote may be outdated, and most likely the situation must have changed, probably for the better. But all the same, according to the 2010 Household Income and Expenditure Survey, the prevalence of stunting was 48%, meaning that about 50%, about half of the children under 5 in Papua New Guinea are stunted. In present day terms, it means that about 500,000 children in the country are stunted. I have to emphasize here that there is an important need, critical need presently to conduct a national nutrition survey so that we can be able to ascertain what is the actual situation in the country and be able to plan and target better going forward.
Now, you briefly touched on stunting. Is there a correlation between stunting and malnutrition?
Yeah, indeed. Stunting is a form of malnutrition, and a form of malnutrition which is called a chronic form of malnutrition, because this comes about after long-term deprivations, okay? And stunting has a lot of negative impacts on the child, okay? Because it has impacts on cognition, meaning that if a child is stunted, they have a lower cognitive ability, meaning that their achievement in school will be impacted. Stunting as well as other impacts beyond just schooling. It also has impact on the form of productivity of the child later on in life when they are adults, productivity of the population in terms of human capital development. It also has an impact on non-communicable diseases later on in life.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll go for a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching InFocus. Now, Andrew, what is your assessment of the number of qualified nutritionists we have in the country?
I'm not aware of a database for qualified nutritionists in the country, but from my recollection and my interaction in professional cycles, I find that we don't have adequate qualified nutritionists in Papua New Guinea.
Now, Andrew, are our medical schools and health training institutions adequately training specialized child nutritionists in the country?
From my recollection, we don't have any of the institutions in the country that is teaching child nutritionists in the country. But the good news is that the government has recognized this gap and is already taking action. The government, through the National Department of Health, is already supporting Goroka University to set up a degree around human nutrition. We expect this degree program to be for 4 years, and this will definitely increase the number of nutritionists in the country in the coming period.
Now, your organization, which is UNICEF, I understand it has some programs within UNICEF that is running in the country to address malnutrition. Could you tell us about it?
No single organization can fight malnutrition. And our partnership with the PNG government, the local communities, including global donors, are vital in winning or weaving around strong safety nets for our children. Having said that, UNICEF normally supports the government to implement nutrition programs, okay? In the past, there was less prioritization of the nutrition issues in the country. But more recently, the government has taken the leadership, has shown commitment, and actually has already invested in nutrition in the country. Recently, the government invested around $80 million in what we are calling the Child Nutrition and Social Protection Project, which is starting in two provinces, that is Medang and East New Britain. They plan to scale this up later on to even more provinces. This is very good for the country because the government is leading in the forefront. In addition, UNICEF is also supporting the government to implement nutrition programs across the other provinces. And these nutrition programs include things like growth monitoring, okay? They include care for children with severe acute malnutrition. They also include community nutrition. They include micronutrient deficiency control programs in the form of micronutrient supplementation. These programs also include social safety nets programs for children and their mothers in the form of nutrition-sensitive social protection programs. All these programs, we work together with the government, together with donors, together with other partners to be able to increase the impact of these programs for the country.
It's a good segue into my next question, and it's around the National Nutrition Policy. The current one, I believe, might be expiring next year. What is UNICEF doing to assist the government in the formulation of the new policy?
The current National Nutrition Policy runs between 2016 and 2026, meaning that by the end of next year, it will have expired, so to speak. Presently, UNICEF is already in conversation with the government, of course, through the National Department of Health, to develop a new national nutrition policy. Based on the government decision, we'll know whether it will run for the next 10 years or otherwise. But we expect to have a new national nutrition policy from 2027 and beyond.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back. You're watching InFocus. Still in the studio is UNICEF PNG Office Chief of Nutrition, Andrew Mosyuki Sami. Now, Andrew, are children in Papua New Guinea consuming enough dairy products?
Overall, a vast majority of children in Papua New Guinea are not consuming adequate foods. Adequate foods in terms of the balance of the meals, in terms of quantity, okay, in terms of amount, that is, in terms of quality. Quality means the combination, the different types of food, okay? So out of the surveys that have been done, like the demographic health survey that was done in 2016 and 2018, you'll find that only about 3 out of 10 children are consuming adequate diets, okay? Meaning that about 7 out of 10 children are not consuming adequate diets, okay? From the survey as well, you find that about 6 out of 10 children are actually, who are under 6 months, are exclusively breastfed, meaning that 40%, or rather 4 out of 10 children are also missing out, okay? If you look at what the children are being fed even at homes, you find that the quality is not good. The quantity is also not good. You find a trend whereby mothers nowadays are feeding children with quick fixes like noodles, for instance, okay, that are not nutritious for the children, okay? However, the country is endowed with a lot of good food, okay? We have a lot of garden food out there. You go to the market, you'll find cocoa, you'll find a lot of many other nutritious foods that the mothers and caregivers can give to their children.
It's a good segue into my next question, and it's that to what extent can we draw from PNG traditional knowledge, particularly traditional food and dietary practices? How can we draw from that to address malnutrition?
The country, that is PNG, has a very rich tradition around foods and also about practices as well. Okay, I've traveled around the country in different provinces, and it's amazing the variety and the amounts and quantities and quality of the food that you find in the local markets. Okay, it's just amazing. You have lots of food. I've also interacted with the Papua New Guineans, and I've noticed that even the preparation of the food is also good, okay, and very healthy. Most of the time you find that the food is being prepared wholesome, okay, without any adulteration, meaning that benefit to the child is greater because they'll be able to consume a wholesome meal that is more nutritious, okay? So if only we could stick to this, okay? If only mothers and caregivers could give their children more of these local foods, garden foods, in adequate quantities and in safe environments at home, then most likely we'll be able to address the issue of malnutrition by a big margin.
Now, in terms of therapeutic foods, which are foods that are designed for specific, usually nutritional and therapeutic purposes, and is a form of supplement, how necessary is it for the provisioning of such supplements in PNG?
Yeah, therapeutic foods are normally used for the treatment of children who have severe acute malnutrition. As I mentioned at the start, we have different forms of malnutrition. Wasting is one form of malnutrition, and wasting most of the time is treated using therapeutic foods, okay? These therapeutic foods include things like ready-to-use therapeutic food that comes in the form of a paste. This is more of a groundnut paste, so to speak, and usually consumed by the children at home. We also have other therapeutic foods in the form of milks. These are specialized milks that are produced and that are used only in hospital settings to treat children with severe acute malnutrition with medical complications, okay? The good news is the government of Papua New Guinea has already procured in the last couple of years and provided adequate supplies of therapeutic foods to meet the needs of the country, okay? So we have to applaud the government for that. We have to also applaud the different partners who are supporting the government in the actual provision of these services in the country, across the country, in major hospitals, and also in communities more recently.
Now, finally, we are cognizant of the fact that there is an emerging climate change threat posed by the world to communities. How do you think this will affect malnutrition in the country?
Yeah, climate change is a new thing that is emerging, a new area that is emerging. And climate change has the propensity to affect a lot of facets of our lives, including even malnutrition. You find that climate change has come in the form of droughts in some instances, meaning that there's less production of foods, okay? And the food that are produced probably are of less nutrition, okay? You'll find that sometimes in coastal areas, because of salination, then even the ability to grow crops is limited, meaning that we may have more starvation happening because households and communities will not have adequate foods. When you look at it as well in terms of increasing temperatures in the world, it means that even crops may not be able to survive, okay? And the variety may also change. It may also change the composition probably of the biodiversity because of the different changes in climate within the world. Having said that, it means that there's a likelihood that due to climate change, we may have droughts that lead to starvation, okay? We may have insalination that may limit our ability to produce good, nutritious foods, meaning that we may have more and more children becoming malnourished. However, if we take action early in advance, together we can be able to address the issue of climate change.
Andrew Mosuki Semi, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, viewers, that's all the time we have for this edition of InFocus. Do join us again next week, Monday, on our regular time slot of 7 p.m. Till then, bye for now.
This program was proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.